Ready? Great. The first talk in this session has a panel. David Bremner, also known as just Bremner, Jonathan Carter, known as High Voltage, Sam Hartman, Hartman S on IRC, and Stefano Rivera, Tumbleweed or Tumbling Weed, depending on where you get them. And they're talking about, surprise, you're a manager. We look forward to listening to you and participating.
Right. Thank you very much. So I'd like to start off by asking the panel to introduce themselves, and maybe I'll just introduce myself and what made me want to organize this panel. So some of you might know I'm the upstream maintainer for Not Much, and it's a very small project, and all the people involved are delightful. It's super easy, but nonetheless, it got me thinking about some of these issues. So,
my name is Jonathan Carter, and my name is High Voltage on IRC, and I wear many hats, but I guess the most relevant one to for today is I'm also on the DebConf committee, and I think that's it for now. Do you have a mic? Oh. Mic is on.
yeah, we're really short.
I'm Sam Hartman, and so one day my boss quit, and they basically came to me and said, "Hey, how about you work for this person? I mean, unless you wanted to take over the team yourself." And I looked at that and I'm like, oh no, I guess I'm going to be a manager. And since then, I've also held roles in the IETF as kind of one of the two managers of the security area. So basically reviewing all the proposed RFCs for security issues and managing half the security working groups. And then I manage, people in my day job, and then there's this Debian project thing that I do something for.
So I'm Stefano Rivera. Surprisingly, I also ended up in management by a boss quitting, and well, you're the most responsible person, and you're around. Can you do this? So sure. Yeah, I mean, before that, I'd been leading a team, and I guess, felt fairly natural anyway. And in Debian, I'm also on the DebConf committee, although it's tricky to call that management because on Debian, we really can't tell people what to do. The best we can do is advise and try and lead people in the right direction.
I think that's completely on topic for this talk.
I would say that is generally a good approach for management anyway.
Right. So some of you might know that I'm also a teacher, and I usually threaten my students in the following way. The less questions you ask, the more there's going to be on the exam. So I really want, this is, with all respect, a terrible room for a BOF. We can't see you, but I really would like people to ask questions. I don't know if you have any yet, but feel free to grab a mic at any point and jump in with comments or criticisms or questions. We're tough, we can take it. They're tough, they can take it. So feel free to criticize the panel and me. So hearing none, as they say in bureaucrat speak, I think we sort of covered point one, right? How did we get started? But does anybody on the panel have a good story other than driving their boss to quit about how they become a manager? Jonathan?
Yeah, well, for me, I think in the context of free software, it started in 2003 when I got involved in a project that installed computer labs into schools. And I wanted to volunteer for this because I thought it was a good project, and specifically Linux machines into schools. And I got involved and joined up one Saturday, and I noticed that the volunteers who flashed the Etherboot images on network cards were very inefficient. So I helped that and cleaned up the process and made them all do that quicker because it caused such a big bottleneck. And before I knew it, I was making another volunteer process better and another one. And before I knew it, the organization that was managing the whole project kept coming to me for volunteer issues, and volunteers were coming to me with issues they had with the organization. And before I knew it, I was volunteering managing the whole volunteer project. And I was, wait, how did this happen? I just wanted to casually help out. And before I knew it, this kind of became a big job for me. And yeah, I think that was my first big surprise you're a manager moment back in 2003.
Yeah, free software-wise, I'd say the first project I was seriously contributing to with other people, I had too much time, and so I out-contributed everybody else and kind of pushed them away. Well, you know, they spend all their time reviewing your code and none of them writing their own. And next thing you know, you're the person writing the code and the project around you has died. And you learn not to do that.
Right.
And also that for the long-term viability of free software projects, you really need to bring in new contributors, get them involved, not have high barriers to entry, and try and build a community. So yeah, either I was the last contributor to a dying project, or I killed it. I'm not sure which one is which. But that project brought me to Debian, so here I am today.
Yeah. My case, with not much, I started using not much, and sometime in 2008, 2009, and then Carl Wirth, who was the author in the beginning, got busier and busier, and he was having a hard time getting releases cut. So I thought, well, I could do that. I mean, I don't have to decide what patches go in. I can just, you know, I had some sort of limited idea of the Debian release process in mind. Okay, I'll just grab a snapshot of main and wait for it to stabilize, and that was good. And so I said, yeah, I can be release manager, never understanding the M word in what I just volunteered for. But then Carl just got busier and busier, and somehow I ended up maintaining not much. So I became manager by explicitly volunteering for it, but not really understanding what was involved. So I guess these are maybe not things that really generate questions from the audience. So let's start with a topic which probably does engage people in the audience more. Is this balance between different ways you contribute to a project. And I mean, I know my own experience is reviewing other people's code is much less fun than writing your own code. I think everybody in the room can agree. If anybody in the room finds reviewing code more fun than writing it, please come talk to me, because I know how to make you happy. So, oh, Sam, you find reviewing code, or you want to tell us?
I mean, so I've pretty much, throughout my career, been in the position of reviewing designs and code. I will admit I find engaging at the design level more interesting than engaging at the code level. But no, I actually find that I do tend to get sort of stuck into the gatekeeper role in a number of projects because I'm reasonably good at it. And I find I do a lot of time reviewing, and basically the trick is to find out how to say no in a way that encourages people to be still excited about going forward. I think one of my sort of best stories about this is there was, at MIT, I was a staff member in the IT department, but there was, I was also still involved in the student computer group. And this guy, young freshman comes to me and goes, I want to do a web service platform that's shared across the entire university, then where people can run arbitrary web apps. And I said, well, this had been something that had been tossed around for years, and everyone who thought about it had said that's a complete security disaster waiting to happen. It's absolutely never going to be something we're going to do. But the guy the student was so excited, I didn't want to just tell him, no, absolutely not, never. So I said, well, okay, here are some things you would need to do in order to get this project approved. You would need to have really good sandboxing. You would need to integrate with our authentication infrastructure and have separate authentication for everyone, but not be trusted by the authentication infrastructure, just in case something went wrong and you got compromised. A completely impossible set of requirements. Of course, the student was going to go off and discover that these requirements were impossible and, be kind of disappointed, but I mean, learn a lot in the process. So 6 months later, he comes back and he says, so I've got the solution for the web thing. And I said, what web thing? Well, you told me. Oh, right. Yeah, I did. Okay. Why don't you present that to me? And he'd actually found a way of doing the sandboxing and actually meeting all the requirements. Basically, he'd thought about it in a way that no one previously had thought about it and come up with an answer. And I think that's the most fun part of reviewing, is when you can actually manage to get people engaged and get people to go off and either realize that, okay, this isn't going to work, but be okay with it because they were involved in the process. Or even better, discover that something you were sure was unsolvable actually has a great solution.
Anybody else? Stefano?
So yeah, I spend a lot of time reviewing code, the vast majority of it, really. And I'd say some of that's for continuity reasons. I've been around for a while. I know how things should work, and I can provide some advice on that. But it's also it's a chance to lend some experience to some more junior engineers and help teach them what they should be thinking about. And so I find I spend a lot of time thinking about what the best way to review code is and how to avoid getting caught up in nitpicky details and how to keep a review high level and useful. Because once you get down into the details, I mean, so we're already talking code rather than concepts. You're really just saying, fix all these nitpicky issues and then it'll be good, we should ship this. But probably the first question you should be asking is this change something that's solving a problem that we need to be solving? Does it do it a sensible way? And yeah, should we be making this change to solve this problem? A lot of the time, no, you're actually fixing the wrong problem. You should be starting somewhere else. And moving someone into that direction when they've done a bunch of work can be difficult. All I can really say is the sooner you can pick up that problem and the less time they've spent on it, probably the easier it's going to be.
I mean, one thing that helps is being responsive. I mean, this is a criticism of myself, right? So, I mean, people come in with proposals, and it's good to make time for that, especially for people who are new to the project and maybe don't have all the context, and even if you have 10 other things that you'd rather be doing, because it's just going to get worse the longer you wait.
This is something I really struggle with, because the busier you get, the less responsive you're going to be to things, and so probably the longer people are going to be waiting to get answers to questions, and that's not doing a service to them.
Yeah. So Bernal wants to ask a question. Thank you, Bernal.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here and it's sort of, my neck is crawling because I have a lot of unwilling experience with managing, not specifically with FOSS projects, but I guess DebConf is one of the many examples of that. And so I made a couple of points that I sort of want to share, and then I have one question that I'm not sure there's an answer to. But the one, to introduce that is, what's the difference between leading and managing? Is there a difference, and what is and isn't managing? And then I think through my projects, stuff that you just want to get in and contribute, but then there isn't leadership, and so to sort of facilitate yourself being allowed to contribute, you sort of end up being the manager. But I've found that you really need to give people, the silent people, voices. Because if you don't, then they leave, and that's where your contributors are. And then at the same time, which was really hard for me, and I feel bad for the people I do it to, but you sort of have to also disable or quieten the, I don't want to say bullies, but they really come across as bullying. And I think it was just before I rage quit for Cape Town, but then I obviously came back. I said to someone that my respect is towards all of the volunteers, and that sometimes means that you have to be disrespectful to one of them.
Okay.
And so I think that's a very difficult thing to manage. But then my question at the moment, I guess, comes from specifically being a woman in a leadership position. And I didn't think it was a thing until I started seeing articles about it, but they call it the glass cliff. So like when a project or a company or whatever is pretty much gonna die, you know, and I think Theresa May in Brexit is maybe an example of this, is that women get elected into the positions that, and maybe people in general get elected into a position that maybe they weren't allowed to or unable to enter before, because people think this company or this project's gonna die anyway.
I see.
And, sorry?
Sorry.
No, say, what did you say?
Oh, no, I see where this is going. Or
Yeah, so like, what do you do when you're in that position? Because you have to do something, because otherwise, and I know my previous supervisor now has this problem with the University of Cape Town, which, I mean, personally, I just think it's going to die. And she's like now in a position where she's expected to save it, but it's such a bigger issue than her. So how do you, as a manager, manage this? You know, like, I don't think saying letting it die is a good thing. So what do you do?
So Daniel has some response, I guess, or hopefully.
Yeah, I want to answer that because basically I built all of my career about doing. Okay,
Be shorter.
Yeah, be shorter. I basically built all of my career about doing that. So just like Sam said, he posted an impossible challenge to a student. The student dug through it, came back, and had a result that surprised him. I ended up in the position to always take the impossible projects because I looked for them. I get bored immediately when things are too easy, so I tend to seek the difficult stuff. And so I thought I may be able to answer that question a bit. There are no impossible tasks. The things that look impossible are usually impossible due to a pattern. And you know, it would be a 3-hour lecture of what those patterns are. But usually it is a setup of management not being supportive enough, lack of resources, insufficient timing, demotivated people from 2 or 3 tries before you. So all of these patterns have answers which apply to those patterns as generically as they are. And then there's a lot of dealing with individuals. There are key individuals that you need to identify. You may need to convince them if they're above you. You may need to get their buy-in, their support, if they're your peer group, if they're below you, in a hierarchical sense. So there are no impossible projects, right? It may be that only kind of extending the timeline, increasing the budget, getting the 3 right people on the project that have always been ignoring it is the solution. And that's what you need to aim for. And yes, I see a pattern as well of, this thing is going to die. This guy is, very motivated, so, let him show what he can do. But in all honesty, if you're really good, that is your chance, because this is going to die, and you show them it doesn't. And once you have built that pattern, you can basically do any job, because they trust that if anybody can solve this stuff, you will be the person. And I make a good living out of it, so I can only advise. If it's your thing, if you can take the heat, if you're completely stress resistant, do it. If not, do something else and have fun.
All right. So that was a very go-getter answer. Sam?
So I guess my 2 things are, 1, know what you want and understand that may be different than what other people want. Know what your limits are. And don't be afraid to fail or quit. Like, if it turns out that what the project wants is different than, what you're willing to give, it's okay to say, well, hey, that's great for you guys. I'll be off over here doing something else. Not, try and have a graceful exit, but you are not compelled. Your needs matter, both in terms of avoiding burnout, avoiding your own burnout, and in terms of treating yourself with respect. And you can do that in a way so that other people will respect that decision. I've actually had, I quit as the chief technologist at the MIT Kerberos Consortium because they wanted me to spend 6 months firing people. And I looked at that and I'm like, that absolutely is the job they needed done at that point in time. And that absolutely wasn't what I needed to do at that time. And so I thanked them and actually ended up having a good relationship with the people involved later. Similarly, I was on the Debian technical committee, and the Debian technical, I had a, when I put my name in the hat, I said, here's what I'd like to do. If you elect me, this is what I'm going to try and do. And then I came along and said, hey, we're not really doing a good job of this stuff. And basically people were like, well, yeah, we don't want to. And then I went to the project and I said, hey, guys, how does the project feel about this? And the project's like, no, we don't really think the technical community should be doing that. And so I said, well, okay. It was a really great time. I had a wonderful opportunity to work with some prestigious people. And I can still work with those people today. I still hang out with them regularly. But, that wasn't where I needed to be spending my energy. And I mean, if that happened with a DPL job, I wouldn't be afraid if, I talked about what I wanted to do. And so long as there's enough of an overlap, I'm happy to continue doing it. If it gets to a point where there isn't, then I'll work on a graceful transition. But, our own needs really do matter. And I've managed to make a life of respecting myself and the people around me where I still have a good reputation, even though there are times where I've determined that what other people wanted was different than what I needed to be doing and have walked away from a situation. And so if you're going to approach a situation that's, where it's not clear that it's going to succeed, that's fine, but be honest with yourself and everyone about. You're going to give it your best try. You're going to throw in what you have. But you're not promising a miracle that you can't necessarily deliver.
I would like to add, but to both what Sam's been saying and what Daniel said earlier in your response, don't do what I did. I tried to hold it together. I tried to
eat the mic.
I tried to keep the project running. I was under-resourced. I was not being listened to by my upstream. And as a result of that, I wasn't listening to myself. I wasn't listening to my friends around me who could see me putting myself into an ever-decreasing spiral. The result of that was I quit my job back in January last year, and I have not worked full-time since. It's taken me the best part of 18 months to recover. Do listen to that little voice in the back of your head which says, you've bitten off more than you can chew. You're not getting the support you need. Step back and let it fail. Don't be bloody-minded and just try and drag it through. It's not going to help. Long term, it's going to hurt you. And if there is no support to make a project work, then quite frankly, step away from it and let the project die.
So thanks for those responses, and it's great to have all this audience engagement. I think there was one aspect of Brunel's question which none of the white men responding were able to really address. And if any of you can guess what that aspect is and can help with this notion of being the sacrificial lamb, Brunel, do you want to get a chair and come on up? I know. I said that to myself already. Yeah. But
I don't think it's a token at all. I think this is exactly an example of how it should work. So yeah, I think there is something like a glass cliff, and maybe some projects are just too big. So I mean, thank you so much for Daniel and for Sam and for Andy, because it's nice to say what Daniel and Sam says, and it lifted my heart so much. Because I think as women, we sort of try to balance it all and hold it together. I'm putting myself in the shoes of my supervisor now, who how do you, if you can't do it, how do you let an institution of 26,000 or however many people it is fail? And I think that's where we are with climate change as well. It's how do you do that? But saying that someone had the faith to put you in that position, even if you were the sacrificial lamb, they still did that. like that's a fact, and you can use that fact. So, and I think the confidence, I think, is the hardest thing for me to keep on keeping on. And if it was just me, I wouldn't be able to do it. Like, I know exactly where where Andy is. But having a community, and I guess DebConf is that, like, or Debian is that to me. And I speak to Graham, my partner, about this a lot, like every evening, because he gets all the DD lists and, you know, all these really hard issues. But there is support out there, and I think as women we need to remember that. And like, just not look at the people who try to push you down, and just look towards the people who can guide you and mentor you. And it's fucking hard. Like, there's a lot of issues out there that I think is special to minorities, but we're not where we were a long time ago, and I think we just keep working on that. So, thank you.
Okay. Daniel?
You broke it.
The batteries are back.
We already have a token ball guy.
So I wanted to say two things. The first thing is, if you lead an organization of 26,000 people and you're in a difficult position, fucking get help, right? Because you will have a budget. There are consultants out there, free pitch, that you know that have experience and that you can delegate parts of the piece to. Every big problem you solve exactly in one way. You cut it into smaller problems, and you delegate parts of that to people that can cover it. So, you know, that is a pattern that I guess she will know, and she needs to be just making sure she gets the right support. And the thing is, I think ideally we have the same approach that a woman or a man leading an organization doesn't make any difference. The thing is, women work differently, lead differently than men, and that is great because this type of diversity is completely essential to an organization. If you have the, sorry to say that on video, white sausage fest, it is just not as good as if it is more diverse. Because there are external challenges which the kind of classical, well-educated American management role can solve. But then there are others coming in and they're completely out of their capabilities and don't realize it, and then it's too late, and then the company goes downhill, and you know we have thousands of these patterns. You know, it's a struggle. I think as a woman you always have the situation that you have the feeling, the need to show that you can do it slightly better than the man because you are a woman. And I just hope that over time we will get over this, because it's completely idiotic. It's just, you know, perhaps history that can explain it or whatever. Right?
I think we can do it better, for sure. But I think what personally my weakness that I pick up in a lot of other people as well is that you want to please everyone, and you don't want to be that token woman that everyone goes, this is why we can't have women leaders, or this is why we can't have X minority. And I think we need to get over that. Like, sometimes you're just the bad guy, like I said, with trying to silence those bullies. And it sucks, like, being called a bitch. I think it gets you more than I think maybe it gets most guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you that, like, I was, you know, I fully came into this DebConf expecting to get exactly as much heat or more as I actually got. And I will tell you that bracing for that is not easy no matter who you are. And I will admit that my approach to emotions is perhaps not the standard male approach. You know, but it's, I think one of the things we can do is talk about these challenges and understand that actually, no, I think a lot of us really do face that, like, that desire to be like, everything you're saying, I completely relate to from my own personal experience. It is hard to be the person who stands up and says, no, I'm going to take the heat because someone's got to. And no, I'm going to be the bitch because I need to defend these other people.
And if I can add to that, I think talking about it makes it so much better, because whether you're a man or a woman, you realize you're not alone, and that your views are maybe not as unpopular as you thought they were, or that there's reason and people understand that and they respect that. So, like, some people have asked what this tattoo is. It's exactly that. Like, just remember to to do what you really feel you need to do.
So maybe we can switch topics. This notion of how do you build your workforce of minions? I mean, all right. So how do we, I mean, many of us make day-to-day decisions about the running of a project that make it nicer for people who are already in it and less nice for people who are outside it. I mean, I think Deb had this metaphor earlier today, and I'm certainly guilty of doing that. Or I certainly do that. Whether I'm guilty or not is a different question. So I don't know if people have experiences or ideas about, I mean, how you keep the people in the project. I mean, this is something that we as Debian are talking about right now as it happens. I mean, how do we keep the contributors we have broadly happy, but also bring in new contributors? Anybody have the magic solution? Go, Brunel.
Sorry, I talk a lot. I want to channel what the DPL was talking about. I think his entire talk is relevant for that and for Deb Nicholson as well. But for me personally, I think consequences, like if there's a rule and someone broke it, there needs to be consequences. You can't say, oh, it's okay because of this and this, because that erodes trust into the rest of the team. So I think that's really important. I forgot. There was another one, but I forgot.
Does this work? Hello? Hello? Okay, cool, thanks. So during earlier this year, I ran for DPL against Sam, and I was very happy to lose that. But as part of the DPL campaign, the question came over and over, what makes Debian fun, and how do we keep Debian fun, and how do we keep contributors involved? And I tried to put together a kind of a list of things that makes Debian fun for me, that I also thought makes Debian fun for everyone else, and I put it in a small little infographic that Bremner will hopefully get on the screen soon.
Yay. Wow, I am a technical wizard.
There's a link in a channel as well, but let's see what happens.
I'm a technical monster. Okay. I don't know what's going on there.
Anyway, it's in that link.
It's in Gobi now, so... oh, yeah, I could paste it into a browser.
That's what I was kind of hoping was going to happen.
So part of being a manager is you have to make your expectations clear.
So while you do that, I can maybe answer Benel's question about the difference between a manager and a leader, because I don't think that was actually answered, really. So I think a manager is more administrative and taking care of day-to-day business. And when it comes to leadership, I think it's good to lead by example, because we all emulate what we see and do in other people, and I mean, that's how humans learn. We see someone picking up that paper and throwing it in the bin, and things like that add up very quickly. And even if you don't think of yourself as a leader, I think everyone is a leader in some point, because when new people come to DebConf, they see what you do and how you talk and how you treat other people, and they'll emulate that. So in a way, everyone is a leader, and that's always an important thing to keep in mind. But yeah, I think it's cut off at the bottom.
It is. Should I make it smaller? Give me direction here, Jonathan.
People can read the link online as well.
So Jonathan, I'd take that a little further and say that if you're doing a good job at leadership, then management becomes easy. Yeah. Then management becomes far less important. If people are motivated and they're wanting to work on the right things, then management is about making sure that the right people are talking to each other and problems are getting resolved. Yeah. And it's not paper-pushing bureaucracy and the boring bits.
So question then, as a manager, do you sweat the small stuff or do you not sweat the small stuff?
So
not sweat the small stuff.
I mean, to interject a slightly contrarian note, I think thinking about processes is important, and processes are important. I mean, I know you didn't mean to say the opposite of that, but I mean, so that is in some sense sweating the small stuff. And I mean, paper cuts, right, to quote Jonathan, are also a big issue in keeping people well, lack of paper cuts is for most people. Yeah. I mean, your kink is not mine. Anyway, okay.
So can I summarize that as like that you need to enable your people to do the work they need to do. you should trust your people to do the work, and so allow them to just do it, so not micromanage and sweat the small stuff. But part of enabling your people to do the work they need to do is to sweat the small stuff that's going to block them the paper cuts.
I think that's true, but it's also true that you need to see where things aren't working and not be afraid to get involved when it's necessary. I mean, ultimately, you have responsibility, and you need to balance the enabling and empowering against letting things stagnate. I mean, sometimes the needs of the community as a whole outweigh the needs of a subgroup.
So we have 9 minutes left, according to Time Meister Toby. And I'm sure we can fill 9 minutes talking about conflict, both technical and interpersonal. It seems like a huge topic. Maybe some of you might just want to say pass if it's too fresh. Oh, Jonathan.
Hi.
Hi, Jonathan. Sorry.
So I became a not accidental manager when we reorganized the company, and that was about 18 months ago. So I had the opportunity to go and do a course about managing technical people, and that was fabulous. We did lots of what is leadership and management and that kind of thing. That's really quite a fortunate position. For the new accidental manager, are there resources or things we can send them to go and read that will make them be not new anymore? Or do we need to create some resources like that, or what?
Excellent question.
I'd say yes, we should have that. And thank you for volunteering.
You just cut in front of Ian there, Daniel.
Okay.
If he stabs you in the back.
Panel to answer this very important question.
So I think the answer is, if we knew that, we wouldn't be sitting here. We just.
Yeah, I wanted to
Daniel does for a living.
Okay.
I wanted to answer the question.
You're going to answer the question.
There's a whole industry, especially in the United States, that deals with nothing else, right? So if you're an accidental manager, buy the essential Drucker and read it, and you'll be much better off than in case you kind of wouldn't have read it. And then you can work from there. So it's it's Peter Drucker. It's kind of one of the big management.
What's the name of the book?
The Essential Drucker, I think. The thing is, he has like 40 years of writing stuff with like, I don't know, a book every 2-3 years, and that's kind of him summarizing all the stuff. So you can as well read the abstract. It's less reading, less noise. So that I can put it in Gobi. Kind of this is how you get started, and really it's a huge industry. There's lots of training, and what I think people need to realize, there's not a difference between both leading and managing a commercial organization from a volunteer organization. But in the volunteer organization, the people can much more easily walk away. So, the tools that you use need to be adopted to that situation. Either you're able to motivate the people or they walk away. You don't have the salary, you don't have, contracts to bind them. So that is why we have the problem. We have less resources. We can't select our resources that easily, and they stick less. The big advantage is they are self-motivated. There is this inner motivation why you go to Debian, why you join a free software project. And the only thing we do wrong all the time is we, break that. We demotivate people through our administrative processes, through infights, through whatever. Like Benel said, maybe to protect the community, you need to get rid of one person. That's kind of the thing you have to do, because you don't want to lose all the 100 others over time because you can't control that one person, for example.
Thanks, Daniel.
So this is going to surprise you all. This part is not surprising. I'm one of the upstream committees in the Zen project, and maybe what's going to surprise you all is that a considerable part of my day-to-day job is kind of mediation work, or kind of, so we have a number of committers. Not everybody always agrees on everything. And it is often very helpful to have somebody that is respected within the team who you can go to with, you know, a second or third opinion on something. And I would recommend that as soon as possible, you try to expand your team to be at least like 3 or 4 people who are in more or less regular contact, and ideally have at least a technical respect for each other's strengths. It's also, you know, it's okay to have an appreciation of other people's weaknesses. Try not to dwell on those. And if you have that, then when a problem does arise, or maybe when one of your co-maintainers is perhaps not being so nice to a lower status contributor, it's much easier to resolve these kind of things without an enormous amount of drama.
So I remember in the anti-harassment BOF, you mentioned that you went through some mediation that was really horrible and you wouldn't want that for anyone else. And I can imagine that when lawyers are involved with...
Yeah.
And I don't think we want that for Debian, and I think you agree with that. But we all still want some form of mediation that's actually helpful, but that's not too intrusive or destructive at the same time.
I use the word mediation, but I, you know, this is not mediation in the kind of strict sense where the mediator doesn't apply any judgment. Yeah. So strictly mediation involves being completely neutral. Yeah. But if you have maintainers, multiple maintainers, you start out maybe neutral, but you know, you form an opinion about the situation, and it's helpful if, you know, if people trust your judgment, that they might at least feel maybe they still disagree, but that the thing isn't worth fighting over, and that they can live with having it not their way.
So at the same time, I think we need more tools to prevent it from getting to that point. Like we need to work on de-escalation a lot in Debian, because sometimes the smallest little spark...
Sorry.
The smallest little spark can turn into something way bigger than it ever needed to be, and that's really something we need to learn to cool down in Debian.
So we have 2 minutes left. Anybody have a last question from the audience? Last words of wisdom from the... Oh, hey, Jonathan.
Well, you might be thinking on the same sorts of lines. What is one piece of wisdom that you would want to impart to a new accidental manager when they come to you and say,
Stefano?
Hire people for the parts of the job that you don't enjoy. For me, that was the day-to-day managing of 20, 30 people I just don't have time for. I want to pay some time on to technical things, so hire a manager to take care of the HR side.
Brunel?
Yeah, to quote Sam and to link up to Stefano, be clear about what you're in this for, and if the things that you don't want but is crucial for the project and is important but you don't want to do, get someone else. You know, like just be clear about your needs and be true to your own needs as well.
Sam?
There will be someone who comes to tell you about all the politics that you don't know about. Ignore them. The thing is, yeah, maybe you may stick your foot in it, but honestly, you might also de-escalate a 20-year situation by just not caring.
Right, thanks. Jonathan, last words?
Words of wisdom, let it be.
There will be an answer. Everybody, let it be. Okay. Nobody remembers the Beatles. It's so
just
weird.
Deeply.
Okay, I think we're done. Gather people who know more about the topic than yourself and sit them in front of a table and let them talk.